Okay, sorry for the single camera for all of us, but this is the Capital Planning Committee of Wednesday, July 10th, 2024 at the Witter Building Upper Conference Room. Calling the meeting to order. In accordance with the requirement of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded by Zoom here and it will be uploaded to the Lunenburg YouTube channel after the meeting, and it may be broadcast on public access. That is the discretion of the Public Access Cable Committee. If you would like to join this via Zoom, the Zoom webinar ID is 852-0850-8154. And if you want to join by phone, you can do so at 888-475-4499. Once again, the webinar ID 852-0850-8154. The agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. I'll ask if there's any public comment from the committee members. Any public comment from the public? I'm assuming the raised thumb is like the raised hand, Mr. Passio.
Yeah, I missed the correct one.
Okay, I thought maybe you're just over exuberant about what I just said.
Have I got the floor?
You do.
Okay, David Palacios, 56 Whiting Street. Made these comments a couple of times at Board of Selectmen's meetings, and I think I alluded to it at our last Finance Committee meeting. I've been trying to ask adamantly that the Board of Selectmen consider applying a portion, if not all, of the remaining ARPA funds that have not been allocated or need to be reallocated, whichever it is, to the smaller infrastructure projects that still remain on the capital planning list. I feel it's very important for some of those small projects to get done. The DPW garage is leaking and is just continuing to deteriorate in the corner near the DPW director's office. The Boys and Girls Club carpeting, that was deplorable 3 or 4 years ago, and as far as I know has not been updated at all. That's on the list. The engineering for the second floor at the public safety building is another one that's in the $50,000 to $60,000 range. I had given a list. I don't have that in front of me. There's one more item that's on the list. I honestly don't remember what it was, but there were relatively small numbers: 35,000, 30,000, 60,000. And I really strongly believe that those projects should be banged out with the ARPA funding, and then allow you guys to concentrate either on the next steps of those projects, or not even have to deal with those 3 or 4 or 5 projects that are presently on the list, and concentrate in other areas in your next deliberations for a capital plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, there was a discussion about that last night about ARPA funds, and now there's a desire on the board to reach out to a whole bunch of people and ask for more requests. I think we have enough requests. I tend to concur with Mr. Passios, and this committee rated all the projects, and I think the ones that are not overly expensive and that we can fit a lot of the smaller ones in with this money makes all the sense in the world, especially in envelope projects and like the roof and things like that. But that is my own feeling.
Yeah, I totally concur with you. Just coming off of the 2.5 override,
right?
To not spend it on shovel-ready projects is, well, I don't know. I don't think it's best judgment. I understand the argument of the intent of the law when it began, but the realism is they changed the threshold to $10 million can be spent however you want.
Right.
Let's go spend it how we want, because
Right.
we have some serious financial problems in this town. Nothing.
Any
got
other,
No, so I got the impression that the water district's gonna come knocking for those funds at today's meeting. Or may
after
come-
today's meeting?
Yeah, after today's water district, I haven't be yet, so.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I don't see anybody else in public, so. So reorg first, and even though we don't only have 4 members, as I said, I cannot continue to be chair because I'm on a new job and it's not, I don't work from home anymore. So, and we need to reorg, and we have to reorg again when somebody else joins, but we don't know when somebody else is gonna join. So,
That's a worthwhile public comment, just in the case that anybody stumbles across the recording of this meeting, we have a vacancy.
yes, that's
And,
good. And it's the town moderator's appointment. It's
Right.
not by any other board, just the town moderator. So if you are interested in serving on the capital planning committee, please submit a form to the town hall and address it to the town moderator or address it to the select board, and it will get to the town moderator. So I will open everybody here is from other boards. They know how reorgs work.
Mhm.
So I will open it up if anybody is interested in nominating or offering to be the chair.
So last year, Peter, you had expressed interest in it. I would be supportive of that. I don't know that I had the time.
I'd be happy to do it.
Yeah, I could not right now, so.
So I'll nominate Peter Beardmore.
Second.
Any other nominations? All those in favor, please say aye.
Uh,
Opposed? Vice chair. I can serve as vice chair in that off time. Don't quit. I will hunt you down.
Well, then your first action as chair then chair could be to call for a reorg.
But barring anything unforeseen, I can be vice chair.
Are you Republican in the House? Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, nominate Tom Alonso for vice chair.
Second.
Any other nominations? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay, and clerk, and the clerk is, we don't have somebody to transcribe minutes, so we actually need somebody to listen to the recordings, and I mean, our minutes are not generally long, but we will need somebody to do that.
You did have somebody?
We had
Well, we
someone.
had somebody, and then that person has, I don't know if they got reappointed. I don't even remember who it was, to be very honest.
Was it Danielle?
Maybe.
It was brief for a period of time, I don't remember. It did switch around a little bit, but it is funded. It's just
Right,
because I
so-
don't recall that.
Well, for nothing else,
minutes clerk
even
fell
for
off.
just filling out the offices, we need a clerk. You
Yeah.
don't have to do it, but
I mean, the good news is nowadays with ChatGPT and transcriptions and that kind of thing, we can.
Yeah,
you don't want a transcription.
but Zoom can make a transcription that you can cut down to minutes.
You can drop
relatively
into a
easily.
ChatGPT.
Right.
Would you like to be? Are you sure? What if I get like Mr. Lincoln out of my wallet? Would that change your mind?
Pete Lincoln can't fit in your wallet.
You talking Pete Lincoln?
I'm willing to be chair. That's
To be chair? Yeah,
Sure,
clerk.
no. Hell no. I mean, heck no. I'm willing to be clerk.
I'll nominate Matt Brenner for clerk before he
Second.
changes his mind. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. You want to run the rest of the meeting? Or you want me to run it?
Okay, I'll do it.
There you go.
Okay, next item on the agenda is discussion of 5-year capital plan. I think that we should I want to stipulate that the following item after that is discussion of capital planning process going into FY '26. And I do think that there's a possibility that be brought together for purposes of discussion in terms of how we do this. But we can take them entirely separately as well. But, obviously, the reason why we're actually sitting here in July, is a shared desire to better address a 5-year capital plan and come forth with a recommendation that, brings some value, to the town's planning process, complies with the charter, and offers good feedback and guidance to our internal constituents in the departments as well. This year is going to be a little bit different from the way we have conceptually perhaps even thought of this last year, in that we're going to be working through an interim town manager and a town manager, new town manager coming on board and that sort of thing. And we have the budget task force, whose charge also includes a capital plan out. The capital element is part of that charge. So I think that it's important that we have the ability to weigh in on this, and also ensure that it is that our capital planning needs are adequately considered through all of it, to include the steps that we need to take with an interim town manager, onboarding a new town manager, and working with the budget task force. Any comments before we get into sort of how we do that? But we could also jump right into that too.
Unrelated, I hear someone coming in now and I don't know why someone would be in the building besides us.
So many words here.
Oh, it's on, okay.
Yeah, I don't disagree. That's what we've been talking about. So, I mean, that summarizes what we were talking about, why we're here, and typically wouldn't be here in July.
Yeah.
Before I forget, I want to bring this up because the town manager asked me to bring this up. And I will forward the email now that we're in a meeting. But she had published or sent around to the chairs of the different committees, this one being one, so she sent it to me, a budget calendar. And her question related to us is, I sent this out, have we as a committee discussed when they want the information to go to the departments? As she put in her town manager report last night, Chris Ruth, who's the facilities director, he's going to be out on maternity for 8 weeks, and his department is one of the ones with a lot of capital requests. Just a thought, as they may want to keep the same dates as last year and in my draft budget calendar. So I'm going to forward the draft budget calendar.
So some of Chris's capital plan needs come strategically from other boards and commissions, right? So whether it's parks, library, the town building committee, or whatever it's called nowadays. I do think a lot of his capital could be driven from kind of that strategic look from those groups as well. So we may want to reach out to them to start to think about this thing, what's in their visions.
So I was unaware of that element, which I do think is going to be something to navigate around.
Yep.
Is he on paternity leave now, or is planning?
Yes.
Do you know the details?
They just started. Yep.
As of yesterday.
Yep.
Okay. So 8 weeks out.
I just sent the email for the draft calendar to everyone.
My thinking on this was that, and this encompasses both FY26 and 5-year, the way I'm thinking this. Because we're looking to do things a little bit differently and be more encompassing of the 5-year view. My original thinking was we start with years 2, 3, and 4 of the documents that we got last year,
Mm-hmm.
and have discussions around them with department heads, like, are these still valid? Where do these sit relative to your priorities? Would you move them in and out a year or that sort of thing? And then, basically sandwich the process. So start there, then go into FY 26, and then come back to it at the end of the FY 26 process. That was my original thinking, and I can't say that I'm married to the thinking on here. It was sort of like, okay, how do we do the job of getting the 5-year discussion going, meet our obligations in terms of delivering the proposed capital plan to a town manager by the end of the calendar year, and then offer something in the way of a 5-year strategy.
Well, I have an idea. I
Please.
mean, so the idea was before there was a town manager resignation that we would catch up on the 5-year now.
Yeah.
That obviously, as we know, is now in the air. So I think what we do is revamp we modify the FY 26 process such that we capture all the information we can while we're doing the new capital plan, but ask for all the information for the 5-year plan at the same time so we could gather that, so that after we submit it in the winter, in January, after we submit it, we can work on the 5-year plan, but we'll collect all the data when we have the meetings with them. And then we use the spring for a follow-up on the 5-year plan. That would seem to be something that, I mean, again.
Yeah, now, I mean, but we do collect all that data. Like, if it's in the 5-year plan, it's going into ClearGov, right? Like, we have the data, or is it just?
Well, last year was the first year I think we used ClearGov.
I think we did
Yeah,
the year
well,
before.
maybe. Well, maybe yes, last year was the second year.
So I think you can get some of them out of the way real quick, right? You got fire and police, you can probably get through theirs pretty quick.
Mhm.
I think libraries probably right on their heels, they put a strong board, they, they had a good, probably 5-year plan. Facilities will be hard, school facilities is another one that's kind of crucial to get balanced, pulled together. And then
And
DPW.
DPW, right.
I think one thing we need to consider is, are all the department heads trained in putting together a 5-year plan? And what that means, what does that look like? And then is there things we can do to help them navigate through that? Whether it's those of us who have put together, long range planning, really planning, working with them individually on it. To just get, those skills there, if they need some assistance or tools, if they need some tools to do that. To the DPW, almost to the comment that Dave made, maybe specifically the comment that Dave made. I think his other item that he's mentioned in the past is like the tree survey. And that was one that during budget discussions, there was a lot of discussion around how do we get ahead again or put a real plan together for 5 years or however many years it should take to get trees under control. It's that kind of planning that drives both operating costs as well as capital items to support that. So that may be another one that, let's go put some ARPA money towards, the tree survey. It's something we get done real quickly. It's something that is needed. It's something that's driving the budget. Stormwater is another one that
Yeah, and Stormwater Task Force is moving with renewed vigor and sense of purpose. I haven't been to the meetings, but what Tim Wilson has been reporting back from them on the planning board. They are my understanding is after years of not feeling their direction keenly, they have it and are pushing in that direction. So it may be worth looping in with them. I can talk to Tim some coming up and see, because I don't know exactly where they are in the process, but they are trying to do their job of figure out how do we fund all these stormwater issues.
Yeah, and part of the forecast we may need to put together is just an estimate here's how much we should be spending on capital over the next 5 years. And balancing what we probably can afford and what the needs are. And then actually giving, budgets to the managers and say, try to manage to this 5-10 year budget, whatever it is. And maybe the onus is a little bit on us, or perhaps the budget committee. But that would be some of, my ideas on how we could attack the problem.
So I really like your idea in terms of reaching out, setting expectations, communicating what we're looking for, right? I think one of the things that happened last year in both the capital planning and then again in the budgeting process, in terms of the presentations that were made to the finance committee, is that we're still not at that point where there's any level of standardization, even relative to what budget we're presenting, and I think that it's probably less of an acute problem for us than it is for the finance committee, but I still think that we probably should think about, kind of what is the standard, right? How are we looking to consume this information? What is the information we're looking for? We should probably have a discussion, and I'm not prepared to have that today, around, okay, let's look at the Collins scoring that we traditionally collected, and then say, okay, do we keep this? Do we add to it? Do we subtract from it? That sort of thing. We had a little bit of that discussion last time, but I do think we should formalize that, because things like, for example, the cost benefit analysis, comparing it to, contracting work versus buying a piece of equipment and staffing the work that's done on that equipment, that should be part of the analysis that we have not been getting in my tenure here. So, just sort of thinking through that list, I think we should probably set expectations in terms of what we're looking for. Maybe even, make up a sample presentation, based on something, absurd but still instructive, and then maybe have a meeting with the department heads or individual meetings, consulting meetings with them, because I think that if we can establish a level of consistency and quality, I think that our conversations that we have during those presentations could be a lot more valuable, and probably less time consuming or more efficient or something.
I think standard format for the way data is presented is important, because we found this, even more on maybe the finance committee reviews, is that one presents it one way, another way, and then you're like, oh, wait, this is not against the manager's budget, this
Right.
is against your own. What are we looking at? So a lot of time spent kind of. And honestly, I think the town should have a brand. You look at any company and
Oh my God, if we had a brand guidelines, and that would be
Or just
so.
a template.
That's part of
I
that.
know
I
that.
would.
I would go just with template, yeah.
I would not kill a man, because that would be illegal. I would do whatever is the legal, ethical equivalent of kill a man to get that done. There we go. I don't know what that would be.
I don't think it's hard, but I
Yeah.
just think it brings also that feel.
If for nothing else, just to collate data. If everybody had the same spreadsheet, you want, make your PowerPoint whatever your PowerPoint is. But the data sheets should be in Excel in the same exact columns, the same format, so you can consolidate all of them in one form.
If we're going to continue with Collins scoring in some capacity, I think it's also important we potentially give examples to the department heads of what those numbers mean in some areas, because there's areas that are very wide open for interpretation. And if one person's padding theirs and another isn't, well, congratulations, the person who's padding just won. I mean, it's not that simple,
Yeah,
but
I mean, you're right in as much as, for example, I think that one particular item in terms of, is this a multi-year project or not? You know, I think it's very easy to flip the bid on that one,
Mhm.
the way it's worded. And I think that we're getting inconsistent answers on that relative to the actual truth, right? So that's one that, by the way, I'm not sure how relevant that particular one is. I'm also not sure how relevant the scoring is. I mean,
Well, I think it's a guide. I mean, it's like if I could equate it to like racehorsing, right? You got the tout. It's the tout sheets, right? So there are people's recommendations. There are ways to rate people. There are ways to rate the project. This is one way. I don't know of anybody who goes by it strictly. I use it as a guide.
Yeah.
You know.
It's also time for them to fill it up, so
Yeah,
I don't think I used it. Yeah.
so my first year, what I wound up doing was I went through this process of like, I started with a 1 through 5 and kind of created little subgroupings.
Mhm.
And then when I couldn't delineate between the items in subgroup, I actually went to the Collins score and you know, rated them that way.
Well, that's what
I couldn't figure out in my own head how to, you know,
Yeah.
how else to do it.
I rate the importance of the job or of the project as presented for lots of different reasons of my own. And then if I have two that are close, I'll be like, okay, well, what is the Collins score? I mean, that's like the last thing I'll look at.
Yeah, that's kind of how I did it.
Yeah.
Last year, I wound up not doing that because I was able to, you know, formulate my own logic
Right.
on the whole list. But the year before, I wasn't for all the items, and that's what I went to.
Right.
So,
I also think though, if someone's saying there's efficiency by procuring capital equipment, I want to see a productivity increase associated with the labor on that. Meaning, if I'm buying something for cemetery, I want to see them going from mowing it every 2 weeks to every week because they gain that efficiency from the purchase of equipment. So I think that gets into the management aspect of this, of the town, is that we need to be monitoring that stuff. And if we're investing hundreds of thousands of dollars on something that says efficiency, I want to see it, right? And not just wave around terms that are not measurable.
so what I think we're coming to, and we could brainstorm on a list right now and consolidate that, then around and have a more substantive discussion and kind of finalize that list at our next meeting. But I do think that we need to kind of collect that list, rationalize that against how we're collecting the information right now in ClearGov and Collins and that sort of thing, which, by the way, I've never gone directly into ClearGov and looked at any of this, right?
No.
It's always been sort of filtered through the town manager.
Right.
Do we even have
Without-
access to ClearGov?
I think that there's a public view that should have access to.
I have no idea.
Nobody on this board has ever asked or had, whether we have the possibility of getting it, I don't know, but we've
Mm.
never done it before.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so, you know, that even obviously, you know, leads to another question. You know, are we running it through that specifically for, you know, accounting and procurement purposes, or what other purpose of, you
Mhm.
know, is it just long-term record keeping? What is it? I do like the indexing that the town manager has gotten us on in terms of capital, because when they land in 1 year, we can at least track like what year it came out, you know, like that sort of thing. So I think that there are benefits to the system that we're on there.
Mhm.
But in the absence of a town manager, like, we've got to figure out how we're going to interface with that
Mhm.
without her walking those documents in for us.
Yeah, one of the things the finance committee has talked a lot about, and I know Evan's gonna bring it up into the budget task force, is actually having financial tools that are used to develop budgets, not a million spreadsheets.
Yeah.
We talked.
This has come up in
The school thing too, right? I mean, not the, I wasn't faulting, you know, errors in that, it's just that is error prone.
I'm in total agreement with you, but the problem is like, okay, well, what do we do? What do we get to? You know, where do we go? How do we uncover this,
Yeah.
you know, this thing? We don't have the answer. But perhaps as a collective body, we can figure that out.
Mhm.
So I would propose that, you know, when I construct the agenda for the next meeting, I can take the content from this meeting, kind of roll that up into a document, do a little bit of research with the town manager, the finance director, in terms of the ins and outs of ClearGov, what we can and can't do and then come back with all right, this is the information that we think we're looking for. Both for the current FY 26 and FY 27, 28. I'm assuming probably at this point, our collective opinions we want to treat all the same from a information gathering standpoint.
Yeah, my view is the information is the information.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, data's data.
Data's data.
Yeah.
You can turn it into.
I think what Chris said and what a few other people have touched on, I mean, all of us have been in each of different roles in town government to know. And maybe this has got to be the focus, and maybe there's something to talk about, a select board member, or maybe the task force, is that, what we're lacking is not necessarily, sometimes it's data, but what we're really lacking is tools. Like we keep asking, every year we have to, this committee, we're asked to develop a plan and come up with one, but the tools are so primitive and that it makes the job more difficult. If we spent time developing the tools and people gave us the data to plug in, I think it would be a whole lot easier to evaluate.
There may be something you can reach out to MMA, or one could reach out to MMA and ask, is there a best practice associated with budgeting software and tools? Because I got to imagine of the 351 communities that at least one of them doesn't do it on in Excel and PowerPoint. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's just.
Well, even if they were, even Excel, if you gave people the raw data, at least people, like, I remember talking with Evan about it, with all the spreadsheets for the overrides and everything. If you give people the data, you can at least analyze it. It's when it's different spreadsheets and different formats, and you spend more time putting everything in and basically unifying it, that takes all the time in the world, and you don't even have time to analyze it.
Yeah. Another thing we should bring in early is the grant writing, the grant services that we have, because I think what we're looking at is very ripe for having support from grant professionals, so that we are targeting the projects that might be grant eligible and figuring out a way to do it rather than losing our.
Do we have a path in terms of how we're going to be doing that? Yeah. Not how we're going to do it from a capital planning perspective, but there's this talk of we're going to retain a service or something.
Yeah, contracting services.
At one point, probably before she announced her resignation, Heather was saying she was coming up with like a procedure kind of document for it, so that it is kind of equally spread amongst groups. But I see no reason why we can't say let's get 10% of that, allocated to us and bring someone on to help us through this process. And then, along the lines of grants, I don't think we should just be looking at the omnibus budget and what our underruns in the last year was when we're looking at the capital planning. Chapter 90 is at over $2 million. We have all sorts of other small funds that are out there that could be used for projects. I think that all has to be visible to us, and we need to look at where can we allocate things.
Yeah, that chapter 90 fund rate had your chapter 90 fund, the DPW director actually has a plan that he submitted.
Oh my God.
Who invited her?
So anyway, we can get the plan because he presented what the use of all that.
Yeah,
is.
he's going to present it to FinCom
Right.
too, but I think we should see that plan and we should see how it plays against the capital.
So I think,
But that's not the only one, right?
Yeah.
At one point, we had a list of all the accounts that have money in them, that were grants or other kinds of accounts that are out there. We should be looking at eventually tapping into some of those.
so I think that you raise an interesting point. What I'm trying to formulate in my head here is, what is the lens that we should look at in terms of, okay, if we've got a column or 3 columns that we're looking to classify different projects, is this something that is grant fundable? Is it fundable potentially through another source like Chapter 90 or other funds that we have available to us outside of the omnibus or free cash, or how, you know, how we would normally fund the capital plan? And then what's the probability, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, we can apply for a federal grant, but it'll take 3 years, chances of zero. Okay, you know,
Yeah.
not wasting time with that. But there's probably different lenses to look at to figure that out, but I do think that we need to capture that and potentially use that to help guide, in particular, not just year one, but years 2, 3, 4, and 5, so we can say, hey, this is potentially a high priority thing, particularly if it's a, you know, a co-funded thing where, like a school building thing where, you know, MSBA contributes 50%, we need to be thinking about making sure that we get that 50% available if we get the MSBA funds.
Mhm.
That might not have been the best example, but it was the first one that came. But you know, we need to be thinking about the timing of availability of that money and matching funds and those kinds of things. I think that would be really helpful to figure that out.
It also has come up several times, that projects, especially facilities projects, we have to make sure that they get funneled through the green energy.
Green and the the historical preservation district.
Right, yeah, for different, right, yes. So that should be a question on everything. Are you in the district and have you spoken with the APDC and is there grants for this? And if it's a project or in a building that's not in that and it has to do with energy, have you talked to the green? And because Dave Blatt is, you know, constantly comes to us, like I keep telling people come to us and nobody ever comes.
Yeah. Yeah. One other thought, and Chris, you kind of touched on this, and you know, we've had sort of a narrative dialogue about this over the last couple of years around our role relative to prioritizing projects and our role toward presenting a plan, which my interpretation has been there's a financial element to a plan. It's not just a priorities list. But I don't think you present a plan that includes financial considerations in a vacuum. Like we couldn't possibly do that, right? This requires collaboration with finance committee, the school committee, the select board, the town manager, particularly if we're saying, for example, all of these drainage projects that are on our list, you know, is free cash and you know, omnibus tax money, is that the best source for those projects, right? Should we be looking at you know, an impervious surface fee or something along those lines that a stormwater task force could help us to figure that out, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, in my mind, we need to be figuring out, okay, how much money can we spend every year on dealing with these ridiculous drainage issues? Just seem to be accumulating. Like we gotta get something strategic around that because it just seems to be getting. In infrastructure, I think is a similar issue, right? Like these culverts and bridge projects are similar, right? Like we've sort of said you can't treat it like you would treat a police cruiser or a fire truck that you know you're gonna have to replace in 2 years or 5 years or whatever. But should we be able to containerize that or categorize it, plan for it in a way that is not dissimilar, right? It might not be similar or the same, but is not dissimilar. And right now,
Well, they're similar. I would say that they're similar, it's just that the life cycles are way different.
well, the life cycles are way different, but
So culverts, like you have to replace every 30 years, but you gotta plan that you're gonna do it. And the one tool that individuals can do and businesses can do that, and certainly municipalities can do it, but the taxpayers generally don't like, is you gotta put money away all the time. So you gotta collect incremental money so that you have it when that comes up, and you have all these frequencies
Right.
of capital
Mhm.
elements, but then you have this big fund, and then okay, well, why are we collecting? Why do you just collect it from me when you need it? Like I've had people say that to me, so it's like, yeah,
Yeah, no, and I get it, and I get both sides of that argument, given different sets of circumstances. But the fact is that we have a fund to fund fire trucks and ambulances. We don't have a fund to fund culverts and bridges.
Right.
Right.
Mhm.
So what you do is that you say you need a culvert or a bridge in 5 years, and yeah, we also need to fix the track at the high school, and we fix the roof on town hall. And what's more important? Well, I don't know. They're all so different, right? And when we're pulling from the same fund sources, which is basically our tax bill,
Yep.
right? And on a year-to-year basis. So I guess my thing is can we be a little bit more proactive and strategic around those categories?
I think we can, yeah.
But it's a finance discussion more so than a how do we prioritize capital.
Mhm.
It's so interrelated. Understand. But
Well, I think as a committee, we can advocate for taking a serious look at these things and trying to think, like, okay, maybe we need to have a discussion around do we need a strategy around funding for stormwater projects, whatever the thing is.
well, that
right?
but see, that's where I think, I mean, so my distinction is that this committee is here to say these are the projects that need to be done. Now we're talking with the department heads, so we're vetting out which ones can be can be delayed, which ones should be changed from purchases to subcontracting and things like that. But in the end, the funding isn't us. These are the things that the town needs. So then you go to the town manager, the select board, the finance committee, and you're like, okay, fund it. Like these are the things that are coming down the pipe. Whether you have the money or not, these are going to be necessary.
I do think though, if we had a solid 5-year rolling plan, and then one said, we're funding this, we're recommending funding this because it's in alignment with the
Yeah.
5-year plan, that's a much stronger thing.
Yeah, and
This just
Well,
happened.
I don't think I don't think those are at odds. I agree with you.
We're
I think
striving to
having
do that. I think that the problem is that, what we've had to date is we do have a 5-year or 10-year list of projects.
Right.
The out years have not been vetted. Nobody said, you're crazy, that's never gonna happen. And had a serious conversation with a department head about that, to my knowledge, unless they're private conversations between the town manager and the department head. But we do get those kinds of projects where we all kind of look at each other. Okay, well, that's kind of not.
I do think we've had that discussion, like Brooks House is still on there.
Right. Well, that's a good example.
For more
right?
repairs than probably what the building would ever be
And,
valued
and
at.
so that's a perfect example, Chris, which is okay. Well, why are we not making a strategic decision? Why are we not taking action?
Our plan is to never fund an improvement on Brooks House. It's either gonna fall
Right.
in place, burn down.
And I would say that that's been very clear from this committee.
It's
But
still
it
on the
hasn't been
5-year
acted.
plan.
It doesn't matter. We're never going to fund it, and everybody know. I mean, we don't have the ability to say, "Hey, listen, get rid of the building." Like that's not our authority. But we're telling people year after year we're not funding it.
I think I think our thing would be, I want that off our plan. It is not our plan to ever do anything with Brooks House.
So, yeah, no, see, I agree with that. I think we could go a step further. So every time we don't fund, keep using Brooks House as an example, anytime we don't fund Brooks House, we are saying the current iteration of the committee is not funding this project on Brooks House. Every time we say it, we say that. Now we can say that 5 times in a row,
Mhm.
but I don't know that that's the same as saying, look, here's the plan. Looking ahead 5 years, Brooks House isn't on it. I think there's a different level of.
And you're right. So you certainly could do that. But you know what? The composition of this committee changes, and you could take it off, and somebody else can the next year just say, just put it
Yeah.
back on. So,
But I think where the difference is here is that there's a lot of like we're not taking action on difficult things because we hope that the circumstances are going to change. There's no plan to deal with it, right? So in my view, we should be working through the, the, the demolition delay bylaws and all that stuff on Brooks House right now. You know, because we're gonna do it inevitably, right? We're gonna put it up for bid and get somebody to take it away, like is what's happening, you know, in a house on the North Shore right now, or if it doesn't happen, like, we gotta get rid of that, we gotta get rid of that building. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
My personal opinion. And I know that there's
Probably the majority of.
lots of people who probably disagree with me, I don't know.
Not the majority necessarily of town meeting.
Yeah.
But the majority of the town.
But like we haven't taken action.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we we didn't get one this year, but the last 4 years, there's been a, you know, the charter stipulates a fiscal forecast. The calculus of the fiscal forecast when it comes to capital is the town manager projects available funds for capital. And she looks at what's on that 5-year roll-up of all of the requests and reports the delta between those two numbers. And it's in the tens of millions of dollars, right? But then there's nothing to deal with, right? It's like, here's the delta, but there's nothing to deal with the delta, right? And I think that that's, like, if we could, you know, we could say, okay, how are we going to chip away at that delta? You know, either through additional funding or through bringing stuff off of the list. I think like that's a good accomplishment. You disagree with what I just said?
No, I agree with you.
Okay, so I think a couple of things have just come out of this. Number one, we need to do some work on what we're looking for, and I can turn that hopefully over the course of the next few weeks into some semblance of a proposal guideline or something. I'll work on that and try to figure that out. We do need to have a discussion about the count, because I think we should be setting expectations as soon as
I
possible.
forwarded it to everybody, so you should have it when you get home.
Um,
That's the draft calendar by the town, current town.
so should we read that out now and have a discussion about it now, do you think, or should we come back in a couple of weeks and like, okay, I obviously haven't read this, so.
Well, I only glanced at it, so I didn't
Okay.
look at it, so I'm not.
All right,
really
so
ready
why don't
for
we-
it.
Why don't we punt on that, maybe come back
Okay.
if we can in a couple of weeks and think that through. My thought on this is I want to move as quickly as possible.
Sure.
And if that means we put facilities last, you know, to deal with a paternity leave, and
Well,
So
we
be
should
it.
put it as soon as he gets back, like as early as possible. I think we could probably get everybody in, like Chris said, I think public safety is easiest. You probably put them forward and ask them, hey, put together your list now.
start working
Right,
down that list.
Yep.
From easiest to hardest.
Yep.
Yeah.
Council on Aging.
yeah, I mean, yeah.
So when we talk about, just refresh my memory in terms of who we've had in here in the past for presentations. We have regularly every year, there's a public safety session, there's a DPW session, there's a school session,
IT,
then an IT session, and then, but facilities seems to encompass like library, COA, obviously the general government buildings.
Right.
DPW's buildings. We have gotten library requests, but they've been largely related to, well, we did the carpet a couple of years ago.
we did solar,
Yeah,
solar
okay,
shades.
so there have been smaller
Yeah.
projects.
There
The
was-
solar shades came in from this year, this past year from
Yeah.
the facilities.
And,
I'm just thinking in terms of
library came
how
from
would it be
IT
presented?
too.
Would it come from the library director? Would it come from the facility?
No, facility.
So my view is that presentation probably should come from the director, got it. But DPW or facilities, let's take facilities. Facilities should have parks with them and conservation and anyone else that has facilities that is in there, a representative of that
Yeah.
board
Yeah.
at that meeting. I don't
DPW
think
should
we
have
can-
cemetery if they're gonna do cemetery stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I
And-
agree.
And then I think like there almost should be a subcategorization, which I did on my own sheet, where it said like DPW, conservation, DPW facilities, DPW roads. So that you can kind of get that flavor of, you know, are we spreading the wealth as well? As at least an avenue, an aspect of fairness. But when do you think schools would be?
That is a great question. To which I really don't.
Even if it was a, hey, I got 2 of the 4 schools done.
I don't, and I'm speaking out of turn, I shouldn't be. My thinking on this is it probably wouldn't be 2 out of 4 schools. It would be, here's a 60% solution, we can come back with the other 40%, you know, a little later. A lot of the things, there's new information, but the things themselves haven't necessarily changed from last year. They've gotten, you know, the facilities director has sort of gotten the warning order, like this is coming. And I'm actually meeting with him and the superintendent on Monday next week. So I can get a more definitive answer on that. But the expectation that I said is we're going to be probably asking you for something in the summer or September as opposed to October, which is traditionally happening. And they know that. So, you know, I think we can exceed previous performance. I'm just not sure exactly where to set expectations.
The complex ones and the comprehensive ones, like schools, like DPW, like facilities, should go earlier because we eventually inevitably have questions for them that they have to come back. And if they do it late, then there's no chance for them to get back to us.
Yeah, and you know, and maybe that is the answer or something we look at is, okay, well, can you show me your thinking now? Kind of like what we were doing with the finance committee before, you know, like the informal discussions before the formal presentations. Like maybe we think of it that way. Or maybe it's here's a 60% and we'll see in a month and you bring the other 40.
I'm kind of more like, hey, we need you to present what you need. Like, we're going to make decisions on what you present. If you're not ready, then you know what? Then come back to us next year. But for this year, we're only going to be ranking what you give us. And you can't come in. I mean, I don't like when people come in end of November, like, oh, we forgot this, unless it's an absolute emergency that came up, that, you know, a furnace burnt out and
Yeah.
whatever. But
So from a school perspective, here's the challenge, is that they are racing to do summer projects right now because they have a limited window in the summer. And then as soon as those projects start to get buttoned up, they start going out and getting estimates for the next year capital plan, you know, and so we're asking them to do a lot of this stuff in parallel. And the other challenge that we have this year, it's not a challenge, it's a good thing, but it's more work, is we just got funding for that TCP, for the Turkey Hill project, which we now got to get a bid out, get that project.
For which Turkey Hill?
The assessment and design.
okay, cool.
So we want to move on that because we want to bring relevant information, ideally to a building committee, and have that inform a building committee decision in the spring. So I can come back with a more definitive answer, but I think the expectation that I set was this is at the latest a September submission. So.
Thinking here, that Turkey Hill project with that potential 10-year or however many year, that you have to keep it as a school. Maybe another quick one we could ask Rep. Scarsdale to consider. That does not work well for small towns that are juggling a lot of needs.
So I'd be happy to share with you a letter that I wrote to the president of the MSBA last winter, which I read publicly at a school committee meeting, around how the whole thing is not conducive to towns like Lunenburg. It's really designed for larger municipalities who have dedicated personnel to work with that bureaucracy.
Mhm.
And I personally kind of took it on as a project last year just to try to figure out, like, can we get into the stream over the course of last year? And they were non-responsive, completely reachable, and their information was spaghetti on their website. So, like, just working with them requires a professional who knows how to work. So I'd be happy to share some comments with her. And by the way, I copied her on that letter when I sent it.
We just had a meeting with her and then.
Yeah, I know it's coming up.
Yeah, next week.
It's on MSB.
Oh,
It's Department of Local Services. Is DESI?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so MSBA and DESI are not the same thing. MSBA is a separate. I think they're chartered under DESI. I'm not sure exactly how that chartered. But I'd be happy to share that. That's a good idea. I don't think that the 10-year.
Well, except when we last talked, it wasn't 10 years, it was for the life of the improvement.
They changed it with the newer regs, right?
And that was even worse because, all right, so windows can last 50 years. Does that mean if we put on new windows, Turkey Hill has to remain a school for 50 years? Because that's, I mean, there are parts of buildings that will last that long. And what does that
Yeah.
mean?
So, and I never got to a discussion with MSBA.
Yeah.
But the interpretation that I ultimately put on that came out of the discussions I had with my friend who's in that field.
Mhm.
And his thinking on it was that everything that you do, like buy new windows for a building, there is a published expected lifespan or a warranty or something along those lines attached to those components. And generally, that's what you would attach to. Right? So I want to say, I'm drawing at the number right now, but I want to say like the windows, it was 50 years. A boiler is about the same. Maybe 20. So the reason why things are really interesting with MSBA is they put a hold on all HVAC last year because they wanted to do a study around heat pumps and looking at standardizing on heat pumps rather than replacing these giant boilers in schools. Problem is the lifespan of these things is not what they are.
Not even close.
No.
Yeah, so
One quarter, 1/3.
maybe, yeah. Anyway, it's just, I don't know that that's been reported out, but that's. Anyway, okay. Have we beat this to death, or is there something else we want to talk about? We can look at action items for next meeting. All right, so action items for next meeting. I think we need to bring forth kind of a plan in terms of the information that we're looking for. If you don't mind, I'll reach out to you to have a conversation about like how we're gonna, do we want to get into how we standardize the presentations? How do we want to format the data? That kind of thing. I'll also reach out to the town manager and finance director. What are the clear gov components? And I'll bring that forth to the next meeting with the idea being that we can come out of that meeting with some sort of standard, for lack of a better term, that we can share with the public. And then my other thinking is a calendar. to get us through the next.
Well, we can start with the
Few
calendar
months.
that she drafted and then we can
Yeah,
go,
we'll
we
work
can
on
put
that.
our own from there.
Does that sound reasonable to everybody?
Mhm.
Which brings up another relevant topic, which is subsequent capital planning committee meetings, date, time, and location. Do we know exactly, have we committed to town manager screening committee meetings? I know we have one next week
Next week.
And
Yeah,
there's one on the 31st, I think,
of July.
if I remember correctly.
that sounds right.
So in full transparency, I don't think that we're gonna be ready for the discussion we just described. in one.
No, that's fine. I can't be here next
You're not gonna
weekend.
be
Yeah,
Do we wanna try to meet the week after? 22nd or the 24th? My thinking is if we wait till the 31st,
mm-hmm,
number one, we got another meeting that night. Which I'm okay with doing 2 meetings in a night, but I'm kind of tired now.
yeah,
But if we could meet on the 22nd or 24th and just kind of figure out where we are based on what we talked about tonight, I think that'll give us a clearer path of what happens in September.
24th is, 22nd is not doable for me. I'm gone at the same thing.
Okay.
So I'd strongly prefer 24th.
No, July, I'm
Yeah.
away that week, same reason why I can't make the selectmen meeting. but I'm out of town for the week on vacation. From the 21st to the 20th.
What about the 29th, the following Monday? That's not planning board.
I could meet that night.
Yeah, that's one too.
I think I'm fine.
Okay.
Why don't we do that? And that'll spread the wealth between our 2 common committees
Yep.
on Monday and Wednesday of that week. All right, if it's okay with you guys, I think I only want to schedule 1 meeting
That's
right
fine.
now.
Yep. What time?
7 PM. We'll have to get a location, but hopefully here.
You get a location from Ann Aubrey. And so you get the Zoom, you can ask me all these things. Heidi Spinney is the one who does the Zoom.
Okay.
And I said this should all be streamlined, and I was not met with the kindest of remarks at the select board meeting when I said that.
If it's not, whether it's streamlined or not, we need to implement. Yeah, we should put in a request and it should.
That's
give
my point.
tools.
That's my point.
Yeah.
That's
I totally
streamlined.
agree.
That's streamlined.
I
I
totally
should,
agree.
I should say that this is the day they want to meet.
I mean, literally to put it together a meeting, you gotta get a location, you gotta get a Zoom link. You really should connect with PAC. Right? Like,
I think if you reached out to,
Actually, you don't, with PAC, it's been my feeling, because the meetings are generally posted, we generally know about them 2 weeks in advance, but even a week in advance. When I send the agenda to the town clerk to be posted, I CC the town manager and PAC so they know the meeting is happening. And then
Okay.
they can decide, because all PAC has to do is know if they're gonna cover it live or not, that's all. Or by camera. I should
I
say.
think Suzer IT, using Office 365 tools, could set up a workflow for this.
Mm-hmm.
And for every other board, where you request something, it just goes down, including posting minutes when they're finished.
okay. We will meet at 7 PM on the, I just lost the date.
29th of
29th,
July,
July.
Monday.
Monday, July 29th.
At a location TBD, but hopefully here. Okay.
And if we can get the lower room, that's the one that has the owl camera.
Yeah.
Yeah. which makes it a whole lot easier than everybody just looking at you all the time.
Okay, well, that's a whole other topic, it's running that thing, but, okay, we'll figure that out. Any public comment from the public?
Yes, so on Lockwood, 91 Main Street, and I appreciate the discussions you guys were having today about strategizing and planning, because my experience in town sometimes, we do things well, but I think, long-term planning, I think it's good. One thing I'll ask you all to have in your mind as you move forward with these discussions are, the idea of lifting the entire community together. And I say that because, if we have the best equipped police, fire, and schools, but we don't have, we have one playground in town that is, with rest of the equipment that's not safe. The seniors don't have where to park to get into the senior center. We are not, maybe we can have, not the latest and the best on the police, fire, and schools, but we can have, a little bit less and maybe distribute some of that wealth to other parts of town. I do see, the town is getting, I was really perplexed by the numbers from a school committee meeting that 25% of the school children at Turkey Hill are on the poverty line, federal guidelines. And the numbers for the other schools are not much less than that. And it's scary, but you don't think by looking at the number of houses that are being sold in Lunenburg, you think, what, 25% of the population is living under, poverty lines of the federal government, which is even worse than the state. So we gotta, think of how are we reaching. Another point for consideration for you guys is, are we reaching all the population, or, with the money with our priorities here. And that makes I think that would help us a little bit. So maybe, delaying a project, I'm gonna just say delaying a fire truck, because that costs a lot of money a year, so that we can get a project done. Because some of these projects that I have in mind are never gonna be top priority. They're never gonna look good in paper, better than any of these three requests. And the other thing that I'll ask too is think about continuity of projects. I know last year, I think we were all here when, we had assigned $30,000 to get a permit for the town beach and Marshall Pond, and then we didn't fund the treatment that followed with it. So, we still have another year of that we, that process. It might be 2 more years. But we gotta think of these things because otherwise that 30,000 is just down the drain. Along those lines, I actually have joined the Council on Aging, and we were talking about a parking lot that the town designated $15,000 in 2010 to do the schematic design and the engineering, and we still don't have that. So that's $15,000 in 2010. We still don't have the parking lot. And I know the parking lot was in the capital plan the last couple of years, because I was involved with parks. I kind of remember the conversation. And 2 years ago, that project wasn't funded because this committee didn't feel like there was a good plan. There was the conflict with the playground and so forth. And then last year, they came back with just asking for money for planning for the engineering. And the feedback that it was not a priority, and the feedback that this group gave was, we're not even sure this is doable. We have the playground. At that point, in my view, at that time, there were 2 things that was happening. We were creating a catch-22 for the parking lot, because you can't really say, is this a good location? How can this be worked if you don't have the money to develop those plans? And 2, you moved the goalpost a little bit. You went from 1 year, you're asking too much, to change that to just be the plans. They changed that, and now that wasn't good enough. So hopefully there's, with the long-term planning that you all having, there'll be some consistency to what you're looking for, so that the groups in town can prepare for that. That's my feedback. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Mr. Passios.
Thank you. I'm gonna leave my video off. There's an issue with that for some reason. Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. As you guys have been discussing, and I've been involved in very similar discussions over the years in the same committee. You guys are talking about these 5-year plans, and hopefully with those in place, actually identify the needs outside of the revenue available. I think every single committee involved with finances in town going into the next budget season needs to be thinking that way. And coming towards next spring, I'm not talking about November, I'm talking about next spring. Once you've identified the real needs for the next 5 years, then there's got to be a serious discussion, which there was not last year, as to where that revenue is going to come from to accomplish those needs. And I'll say it right now, it's going to be an override. It needs to be done, even though the town side didn't push for one last year. There is a need. Everything you've talked about this evening, you don't have enough money even just to fund your projects, let alone what other departments need and what other areas of town need. There needs to be a strong adjustment of revenues and the tax levy, and do your best to get grants. But there's never going to be enough if there isn't an adjustment with an override in the next 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Passios. Any other public comment? Any public comment from the board? Hearing none. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
Good night,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.